I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, where we're going to explore how you can leverage your farm data to make decisions. This includes strategic planning decisions over the longer term, but also daily and sometimes hourly decisions that are going to ultimately drive your farm's profitability. I'd like to start by introducing our host. Kevin Pattison is the Engineering Director at Trimble Ag Business Solutions. He played a big role in developing what we know as Trimble Ag software today. Kevin grew up on a working farm and then spent about 15 years focused on agricultural software. He's the brains behind the AgriData platform, which was acquired by Trimble a few years ago. So today our topic is the data-driven farm. We're going to focus on the farmer here and the pain points that farmers experience today. And then Kevin's going to look at the different technologies out there that can help address some of these challenges. So to provide some context for this topic, I'd just like to run through some of the most common pain points or challenges. And at the top of that list is managing variability. Equipment today can do precise applications, but farmers have to manage that across multiple zones and many fields. Once you do that, the data starts coming in and you're trying to make decisions based on what that data is saying. Another challenge is interoperability between systems. On most farms today, there's more than one type of equipment, and piecing those different systems together can be a challenge. Skilled labor is another challenge facing some farmers today, as well as keeping up with the pace of technology changes and innovations. And another challenge that we hear a lot about today is increased regulation and compliance, and whether that's coming from government regulators or, say, General Mills asking about inputs, applications, water management, soil treatment, that kind of thing, information that they need to get to the end customer. So let's get right to it. Here's Kevin and the data-driven farm. He starts off with some interesting findings that paint a really clear picture that can reveal exactly why it can feel so confusing today in the marketplace to know exactly how to leverage farm data to make profitable decisions.
This is a list of companies from one trade show I was at. These were just the sponsors. There's probably 3 times as many of these companies there, and I didn't have time to put all their logos on. But you wonder why farmers are confused in the marketplace and how they have a hard time finding the tool that's going to be best for them. So what I kind of did is I've been trying to break down the different types of systems that there are out there, and really broke it down into 5 categories. Record keeping, which is documenting what's happening in your fields, planning activities, managing inventory, managing your financials, compliance data, and actually just organizing that in a way that you can send it out to different people. Operations management, there's a lot of companies focused on the operation of the equipment, producing maps, making prescriptions, and that's really where they focus. Where's the equipment going? What's it doing? Make it get to the right spot and record it. They're not so focused on record keeping. And then there's a lot of companies working in decision support. So taking information, processing it, and making recommendations or providing insights back to growers on what they should do, whether it's nitrogen applications or creating management zones, different things like that, and helping agronomists and farmers make better decisions with more information. And then within that same group, there's also data providers. These are guys who feed information to these other companies, and they don't really offer a product direct to growers. But you'll see their logos, you'll hear about them. Companies like Planet Labs that do imagery. Airbus is in that same game. Label, there's companies that manage label data for compliance. They would fall in that category. And then there's another group I would call point solutions, and these guys could fall kind of in any of the first 3 categories, but they're really focused on one key thing, and they do it really well. But it's one piece of the puzzle for the farmer, and they need to be able to pull many point solutions together. And I think today a grower could probably spend all his profits buying different tools and hook them up and sensors and things like that, but trying to figure out which ones are going to generate an ROI and actually save them time versus cost them more time is a challenge for these guys. So I'm gonna go through the first 3 a little bit and touch on some of the things we do in Trimble Ag software to help with these, and also talk about some things I see coming in the future that will help going forward. But some of the key drivers for record keeping, I touched on earlier, food safety and food security. General Mills was a good example of that today. We've been working in the potato industry for a decade now. Every potato grower who grows processed potatoes has to report out on their fertilizer practices, their pesticide practices, irrigation, before they can deliver their products to the processor. And as we're seeing in broader crops like oats and malt barley, you guys are going to have to start dealing with those same things, and you're seeing some of that already today. Increased regulation around restrictions on applying products is continuing, and the government's continue to regulate that and add more pressure so you can prove what you did where. Tracking profitability is key. How much is all of this variable rate and different pieces working, which fields are most profitable, which zones are most profitable, which treatments are working the best, trying to manage that and report on it. And then increased efficiencies. As your farm gets bigger, more complex, without all of this information organized in some system, it's just going to create more and more work. And if you can tie into a system that actually saves you time by organizing it and generating some of the reports on the fly for you, that'll help you go forward. So some of the first things about the record keeping side, it all starts at the field level. When we started, that's where we started collecting our information. And the one thing all of our customers have in common is they need information down to the field or the zone level to be able to make decisions and track their data. So mapping field boundaries. Within our software today, there's about 5 different ways to get boundaries, whether it's from the equipment, driving around on a quad, drawing it off a GIS map, uploading a drone imagery and drawing from that information. There's lots of different ways to get these boundaries in, but this is really the starting point for any precision ag and any data management system that you're going to go into, is getting your boundaries in place. Next is tracking field activities and expenses. So there's lots of activities that go on in the farm. A lot of companies are focused on the operations that you're doing with your equipment, but there's also things where you don't have a tractor and display recording information like insurance and fuel and consulting fees, machinery repair, things like that have to go into the system. And if you're going to manage your information and provide profitability maps, you need to get all of that information in one spot so you can start to tie it together. Compliance reporting is another one. Be able to track detailed records on what you're applying and be able to provide them out. If you start exporting your products to other countries, every active ingredient for all the pesticides we have, there's MRLs designated for every country. So if you start exporting out, you need to actually be aware of what you're spraying on your crops, because those are different per company. So I know a lot of guys are starting to talk about shipping containers to Korea and Japan and things like that. This is going to become more important even in our broad acre crops today. On potatoes, this is a big deal. Our guys ship stuff all over the world. So knowing what products were applied and what rates and are they within the label limits is key. Active ingredient tracking on how many times the active ingredient was applied, not just the product, but the active ingredient inside of the pesticide is a key piece of information. We tie a lot of that into the system today. Scouting data, the ability to visit fields, record data, track what you're seeing, use that for forecasting your yields, planning your marketing. If you can estimate yields when you're in the field and use that to base your selling going forward, you can maybe take a better position in the market, track quality and things like that. And also, this is a great way for guys to track whether their treatments they're applying are actually working or not and what they're seeing in the field. This is an example of a specific template for tracking strawberries. So we have things like when is it flowering, how many plants were aborted, vine length, fruit size, fruits per plant, and those can be used to generate yield predictions on different crops as we go through. The other thing that's key outside of the record keeping is the operations that happen outside the field, like I mentioned. Things like managing your inventory, building budgets and plans across your field. So not only tracking what happens, but planning what's going to happen. Building a budget ahead of time and designing those plans so you can track what your revenue is, compare which crops are going to be most profitable, and plan accordingly to those. Purchases and inventory management. Again, if you want to get your unit cost of production down to the lowest level, knowing what you spent on your chemical and fertilizer and seed and having that flow directly into your applications helps manage that quicker, creates efficiencies. Also gives you the ability to see what your inventory balances are. If you buy so much product and apply so much product, it can tell you what you have left within the system. Tracking harvest loads and bin inventory. So once you've got the crop off, be able to take those measurements with a weigh scale, tie them in, what bin they went into from those bins, what contract they went into. Be able to keep all that up to date, gives you the ability to market your grain better. And if there's a fluctuation in the market and you either need to sell or hold off, you know exactly how many tons you have available to sell and you don't miss any opportunities with those. It also, by weighing your loads and pulling them into the system, you can get more accurate yield and tie that into your yield files to do post-calibration later on in the season. From a market position and grain contract tracking standpoint, the ability to put in all of your grain contracts, what you have sold, what you have left to sell, who you're selling with, when your delivery periods are. All of this information is going to make it easier to manage your operation. And as things move forward and we get to more automated, things like Uber and you have trucks that are driving themselves, having this information already digital and available to other systems in the future is going to be key to making that successful. This is an example of our market position sheet by commodity, what you've expected to produce, what you've actually harvested, what you've sold, what's left to sell. Key decisions there. And then looking at your records over time. So over a week or over a month, what do you have to do, what's planned, what's happening, what actually happened, and be able to view that and send people out to the right fields to do the work is another piece of information. And then soil test data, analytical, tissue tests, be able to bring that into one spot, analyze it, look at trend lines over time, over multiple years, and see if you're applying the right nutrients in the right places and which nutrients are having the best effect in your soil, and if you're having any adverse effects, or continue to monitor those levels. And having this data flow in seamlessly into one spot where you can manage it over many, many years is a huge bonus. Getting rid of all your files, and that data just goes to die in a filing cabinet, so if you can get it online and start to manage it, that's key. Moving to the next level is operations side. So this is about creating prescriptions and sending things to the files, seeing what your equipment did, getting the maps back, and actually analyzing that, seeing what rates went on versus what was applied, managing labor and where your people are and how much time they're spending. And then I think the future of this is really automation, and how do we continue to automate and make things easier. The picture on the left is the Seedmaster Dot, which is an automated implement, basically a self-driving implement where you can change the implements in and out, and it's a 20 to 30 foot implement. So these are things that are coming that are going to disrupt the industry over time. So first off, integration with equipment data, be able to visualize what you're doing. This is an example of a field where they strip sprayed fungicide. Without the map, you don't really know that it's maybe a 160 acre field and they sprayed 50 acres of it, 60 acres of it. You wouldn't actually be able to see that if you didn't have the maps to go with it. So tying the actual record keeping data into the equipment data is a key piece of that information. In Trimble software, we have lots of ways to get that information into the system. You can take your USB sticks and upload them, the data directly to the cloud, and we'll process it. You can also put it in our desktop software and process it there and sync it up. And we also have API connections. So with different companies, we have with JD, John Deere, we have a connection, C&H with their AFS and PLM Connect platforms, Raven, Slingshot, and AGCO. So you can log in with your credentials, tie that information to our system. We'll go and pull it and bring it in and process it inside Trimble software. Moving into yield data, this is an example of a yield file that was pulled in off C&H combines. So there's two combines here. It gets pulled into one file and displayed. From here, we also have the ability to look at the different layers that come off of the equipment. There's different, depending on the type of equipment, you'll get different attributes that are available. Trimble's strategy has really been to connect with the pieces of equipment that are in the tractors already, whether it's Deere or Trimble or Case. Other companies are sticking little drives in and just shooting that data up to the cloud somewhere else, and it goes off and and they can read that data there. All these displays are already in the tractor, so we're really just tying into those displays. We don't have a dongle or anything that you stick in your tractor to do that. We also have the ability to export all this data, whether you want it as KML or shapefile. If you need to take it somewhere, we're making all the data within Trimble Egg software portable, because the reason for getting it in one spot is so it's easily accessible, and you can take it out wherever you want to go. So you can export this data to take it out. We also tie it into mobile. So one of the biggest things is make it accessible, make it easy to use and see it. So any of your maps that come into Trimble Egg software will also show up in the mobile devices, and you can access them anywhere. So this is the same yield map and the same elevation map on my phone, that you can go out in the field, you can be driving around, see these files. You also can have management zones, benchmark points, spraying zones. All these things can be appearing on your mobile device. From a prescription side within Trimble Egg software, we also have the ability to build prescriptions, create variable rate prescriptions. This is a 6-zone fertilizer application with just a single product, varying between 150 and 250 pounds. You can build these prescriptions in the software, and then we export out to many different controller files. Within our desktop software, we can pretty much export to any controller that exists out there. On the web, we pick kind of the major ones that are still out in the marketplace, and we can export into the particular file formats for that equipment, and we can also send them wirelessly if they have a telemetry connection on those, depending on the equipment, whether it's John Deere, or Raven, or Trimble. We can send them right to the vehicle as well. The other thing around operations is around logistics, management, and fleet, just where your vehicles are, how much they're operating, how much they're sitting idle, where they're located, the ability to drive to them and see the status of those vehicles. This ties in with the Trimble hardware and the telemetry units to push data up to the cloud and make it visible and push it down to the mobile device so you can see what's happening. Irrigate IQ is another example for the guys with irrigation. Irrigate IQ has a variable rate component where they can variable rate each individual nozzle of the pivot, and they have software that goes on your phone that you can start the pivot, reverse the pivot, and see when it's working and when it's not working. So everything's starting to get connected right into the cloud. Time tracking, this gets more into the people side, and we built this particularly for the growers around just time tracking for their growers. When do they clock in? When do they clock out? We record where they logged in. When they clock out, we record where they log out, and it just builds up your hours, totals them up. You can run reports for payroll and things like that within the system. So profit maps. This is kind of where the two pieces come together. If you have the operational data and the record keeping data with all the financials, you can start to build profit maps where it pulls in the as applied maps, assigns the cost to those, looks at what you've sold, what contracts you've had on that grain, what your sale price was, figures out your cost of your production, and spatially will build out a profit map within the system so you can see what's working and what's not. This is a really powerful tool working with the growers, and as a grower, trying to understand if your variable rate program is working or not, or if you're not doing variable rate, maybe you should be. If there's areas of your field that aren't making any money, maybe you don't need to put as much fertilizer there. You need to look at doing something else to improve that land, or we've had examples where guys have just seeded parts of their field to grass and turned it into a waterway because it never makes any money. So this gives guys a lot of insight into their farming operation and can provide a huge amount of value. The other thing we see happening in this area is more automation. So this is a company actually called Agromatics that builds a Bluetooth sensor that hooks up to the weigh scales of your grain cart, and it connects to your phone and it continually monitors your grain cart, and it will track your loads automatically out of the grain cart. So every time you dump, instead of having to key in the information and write it down, it'll record it into the app. It gets pushed to the cloud. Trimble Egg software actually does a connection with Agromatics, and it'll pull it into our system and tie it into your bin inventory. So the need for someone to sit in the grain cart and write those down or punch them into the phone goes out the door, and it all happens automatically behind the scenes. So I think there's going to be more and more technology coming like this, which is a simple device, solves a problem. This is what I would call one of those point solutions. There's going to be more and more of these coming as we go. The next wave of this, obviously, which is still a bit out, but some of these systems are going to be going into production for demo purposes in the next year. Autonomous tractors and autonomous vehicles. So whether it's a new tractor that's actually designed with a traditional framework like this case one that's shown in the top left, or an aftermarket kit that can go on an existing tractor. Those might be some of the first ones going out. And then there's kind of revolutionary disrupting technologies like this small Zaver platform, which I think they're planning to put 7 of these or something in the field at once, and it will replace a 12-row planter. So there's a bunch of little rovers that are going around planting seed. The Seed Master unit is pretty neat because it's a U-shaped autonomous framework that you can attach different implements to. They're actually going to be running, I think, 3 or 4 of these next year in the field for testing. So this stuff's coming. And I mean, if you look in the consumer marketplace, companies like Ford and Volkswagen and Tesla are talking about having self-driving vehicles by 2020. That's not that far away. I think we'll probably have a lot of these going by that time as well. And I think if you can put 3 or 4 smaller machines that are automated in the field versus one big 100-foot sprayer, you're probably going to, and can run it 24 hours a day and not worry about labor. And if one breaks down, you still have 2 running. It's going to be a game changer for guys going forward. The other piece is more, not so much about broad acre, but mechanical jobs like harvesting fruit and vegetables or picking weeds. This is actually a weeder that'll go over and actually do the job that typically would be done manually. So as we continue to see, I mean, from consumer demand, more organic farms and things like that, there's a lot of manual labor that goes into managing those. And I think there's a lot of money being poured into building these types of devices that are robotic, using sensing technologies to come through and do that work. So the third section I wanted to go over was the decision support side. Big data, we hear a lot about it. I think most people's strategy is let's collect a whole bunch of it and then we'll figure out what we're going to do later. And most people, when you talk to them, they're like, well, we're not really sure what we can do with it, but we know if we can get lots of it, we can do something really cool. So I think we're kind of in that stage right now. But some guys are starting to use that data already with machine learning algorithms to analyze and come up with insights of what they can do. And I have a few examples of that. A lot of it today is focused on agronomy, so nitrogen prescriptions or making management zones for spraying different pesticide rates. That's where a lot of focus seems to be today. There's some stuff focused on operations, but I think that's going to be the big area as we get into autonomy, that we see more investment around the operations side and what they're building. So some of the things we do where we pull in some decision support information is around weather. One of the things we do a bit different in Trimble software, we use a company called WDT, and they had a session this morning. I don't know if anyone caught it, but they do weather modeling. So in the top left would be what you get if you have a single station and you see, okay, well, this was the temperature and humidity and wind speed. With premium weather, you get a contour and it'll actually show you across a broad geographic area with a 1 kilometer resolution of what actually happened on that land. So storm goes through and it might have rained on the north half of the field or north half of the farm, and the south part of the farm didn't get any rain. You can kind of direct your guys over there, and you have to move equipment because it's too wet in one spot. You can gain a lot of insights. Data is also available historically. So if you want to see what happened across the last month or the season, you can look at growing degree days, your temperatures, high and low temperatures. If there was a frost event, it might have only impacted part of your fields. So it's really a cool way to look at that. This is an example of growing degree days over a period of a season. We pull in the historical averages based on that area as well, and then we'll compare against it. So are you warmer, are you cooler? What's really driving your yields? This year in Western Canada, we had a lot of, not very much rain, but guys were surprised a lot by the crop yields they got. So whether it was due to cooler temperatures or less growing degree days matched with the lower temperatures, maybe that helped save some of the yield, but there definitely was some surprises, and this data can help kind of look through that. One of the other things we launched was hail alerts this year. So anyone who's on our premium weather product, if there's a hail event in your area, you'll actually get an email with a map showing you where the hail fell. We run this every night, and it takes the boundary of your fields and checks if there was a hail event in that area, and then it'll email you a picture of where the hail fell. So if you're got a large farm spread across a lot of acres, or you're a crop advisor who's needing to go scout a bunch of fields trying to figure out where the hail fell, this will give you an idea to drive right to where you got to go look. And sometimes there'll be a field that from the road it looks like it's fine, in the northeast corner where you can't get to, that's where the hail came across. You'll see the strips of hail going through the system. In the US, their radar is a little bit better. The picture on the right shows the actual different hail sizes. So as it concentrates in the middle, you can get up to 3.5, 4-inch hail. So it's a pretty neat feature for guys who cover a large area. This is well, does anyone guess what this is a picture of? Does anyone recognize that area? Disneyland? The happiest place on earth, I think they call it. You got 2 kids under 10 and go there, it's the most expensive place on earth. But one of the sensors we actually do work with is moisture probes, and Disneyland works with some of the probes that we collect the data for. So they put all these moisture probes within Disneyland so they can track the water in their trees. So within that probe, they can see the profile of field capacity and allowable depletion. They set their cultivar lines where they want to keep the water levels, and then they can tune their irrigation to actually stay within the range. So saves them from overwatering, saves them from not watering enough and losing trees, which gets really expensive. We have a lot of guys, that's a cool example in Disneyland, but we have a lot of guys deploying this in broad agriculture, both for irrigated land and for dry land. Because there's a lot of information you can learn. If you know it seems dry in the top, but you know you still got subsoil moisture and the weather's been good, you might want to apply more nutrients, or if you know there's no moisture left, you might not want to do that extra pass of fungicide or pour more nitrogen to the crop, which is really not going to help it if it's too dry. So these are tools that aren't necessarily making decisions for you, but are providing information so you can make better decisions. And that's kind of the first wave of the decision support side. And going forward, there'll continue to be more that start to make the decisions for you. As the algorithms get better and people build more models, we'll start to see more of that. This is an example of our interface from our screen for power zones. So a power zone is a product we have that takes many years of satellite imagery and produces management zones based on the crop productivity index that it measures. It's kind of based on NDVI, a Trimble variation of that. Within the tool, you can go in and see exactly what each year looks like. So you could click through the different years and you can pull out wet years or dry years or years that had different anomalies because maybe the field got hailed or it had a disease event and it impacted yield a certain way. Then you can actually regenerate your zones and make new management zones based on your knowledge of the field. So the computer itself can only do so much, and we need the local knowledge and the farmers working on that. So we are giving people the tools to let them do that themselves. And because you can make the best choices. Some years you'll also have fields that continually get put together over time. So it's detecting whether there's multiple crops on those fields in those years, 2008 and 2005. Because this northwest side of the field was not performing as well, it thought it might be a different crop. But I think in this case it was actually the same crop, just wasn't a great year because of the elevation of this field. The other thing that's providing a lot of decision support today is drone imagery, and this has been a hot topic in ag for quite a while now. Guys are buying planes because it's one of the coolest things to go buy. I bought a drone a couple years ago just for fun, and I'm scared to fly it because I don't want to crash it. So my batteries keep going dead, and I have to order new batteries, and then I don't fly it again, and they go dead again. But so there's a whole bunch of guys in this space. Slant Range is one of the guys we've done some work with. They have a really cool sensor. We're just pulling that data in. Trimble doesn't have its own UAV company. So we're looking at just working with any UAVs. We can import geotiffs into our system and display them both within our web software and in the mobile software. So you can take any geotiff and upload it. We've done some work with Slant Range already to do make sure we're displaying their legends properly, and the images look the same in our software as they do in their software. So we've done some stuff there. This isn't a Slant Range image. This is a customer from Tasmania that sent me some imagery. Said, hey, we want to see if we can see this in your platform. We just upload it through the website. As soon as you sync your phone, it's available on your mobile device. You could go scout that field. You could be driving through that field spraying and just looking at the map. We use a tile server, which actually scales the imagery depending how zoomed in, so it won't reduce it in here. The one thing we don't do though, well, we can do, but we're not, there is a limit on the size. So some guys want to upload like 3 centimeter images that are hundreds of gigs for one field. We don't take those today. I don't know if they offer that much value. So these are typically processed geotiffs that will show the detail that you need to do what you're doing in the field if you're just scouting. But if you want to do more analysis, you might need the raw imagery back on those ones. Other things that are happening, I mean, we got more satellites going in the sky every day, it seems. There's new companies launching satellites, doing broad area analysis. I think that's going to continue. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, we got these little sensors that you can now make for pennies versus hundreds of dollars previously, that they're attaching to vines and to plants and to measuring plant size and how much they're growing every day and things like that. And this technology is getting so cheap, they're going to see more and more of that. And I think within the ability to do imagery analysis, there's even better opportunities to do it without all these little sensors. With that, I think I got one video that will sum it up, what we do at Trimble Ag Software, and then we can open up for questions.
You make important decisions for your farm every day, but when you don't have a clear picture of its operations, it's tough to plan for success, and more specifically, your profitability. Trimble Ag Software enables access to all your farm data from one location, anywhere, at any time. Crop inputs are your farm's biggest investment. Our software calculates your cost per acre, so you know the exact cost in each field and can be confident in making key decisions throughout the growing season. You will have peace of mind knowing you're on top of everything happening on your farm. From your mobile device, you can enter or view past applications, track your grain storage and contracts, monitor your equipment's location and speed, and record and share crop scouting findings with your team. Our software has third-party data transfer agreements with John Deere, CNH, and other key equipment manufacturers, so you have time to focus on success rather than sorting through data coming from different systems. With Trimble Ag Software, you will have access to field mapping tools, which will help you be a leader in the shift to precision agronomy. Keep your operations moving forward, save time, avoid guesswork, and feel confident in every decision you make. It's not just your farm that will benefit, it's your life too.
Thanks, Kevin, for that excellent presentation. It gave us a really good overview of where farm data is heading and how farmers can turn some of these trends into actual strategies that will drive profitability. So we've got a few submitted questions that I would like to run by you. Here's the first one. So this is a question from a farmer. This all makes sense. I get it. I know I need to be tracking my data, but it's also overwhelming. Where do I start?
Okay, good question. On our software, I think one of the things I always say to start with is setting up your fields and your boundaries. This really gives you an opportunity to visualize your farm and see it in a spatial format. Mm-hmm. Once you assign the colors to it, you can tell what crops are growing, and this is something that can bring value to your entire organization immediately. Okay. As soon as someone from your organization goes onto the mobile app, they can see their field. If they're driving to a field, they can make sure they're in the right one. Mm-hmm. So it's really the starting point once you get going. After that, it really depends on what pieces of your operation you need the most help with. Some customers like to start with grain contracts and managing what they're growing, what they've sold, along with what they have in inventory, when they have to make deliveries to the elevators. Having this information at their fingertips really can make a huge impact on their bottom line and let them make better decisions. Others might focus on planning and budgeting, where they have to build out a farm and field level budget by crop because they may want to take that to their bank and get approved for lending. So there's multiple places you can start. The key piece is setting up your fields and then diving into the areas that have the most impact on your farm to get a quick ROI, and then you can continually add more functionality over time.
Next, we have a question from a farmer who's getting ready to take over a management role on his family farm. So here's the question. You're talking about an important long-term investment decision here when it comes to software. I'd like to know the most common pitfalls so I can avoid missteps along the way.
For sure, it's a big decision and it requires a lot of work. Setting your farm up on any platform is going to take a level of effort that you want to be careful about picking the right partner. And there has been a lot of investment over the last 5 years in this space. A lot of startups have come out, and there is a lot of flashy interfaces and things like that. I would caution people to make sure they're just not looking at the pretty pictures, but digging into what the software actually does and how it can benefit them.
Okay.
Sometimes the systems that are out there look really great and have great pictures, but they really don't go that deep into the management of the farm.
Mm-hmm.
I think also growers need to be aware that going with a company that's a startup, they may change ownership or their goals might change over time. If they've got money from a venture capital, their goal is to make a return. So one day you may be working with an independent software company, and the next day they might be owned by a large crop input company. So you don't really know. There's also a lot of free apps out there in the marketplace, and some of them are very useful. But similar to those apps, if you're going to invest a lot of time into them and manage your operation, you want to make sure they're going to be around. They have to generate revenue at some point.
Yeah.
So their business model might change, or they might also change ownership, or they might start charging you, and you're kind of going into an unknown when you use those apps. Trimble has been around in the ag space, software space, going back almost 30 years on our desktop software and 17 years of experience on our web-based platform. Trimble's a publicly traded company and committed to agriculture for the long term. So it is a safe choice for growers who are worried about some of those issues of longevity and long-term commitment to the space.
Okay. So given that it is a long-term investment, then reliability is a key piece to consider.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. A last question here. So here's from a grower. He's saying, I'm sold on the whole data question, especially when it comes to implementing variable rate and precision ag on my farm. But what happens when the data is coming in from so many different sources? Does Trimble software help merge it into one central location so I can actually see what's going on?
Yes. Okay. So one of the advantages of Trimble Ag software is the fact that we work with many manufacturers of equipment. Most farms I've worked with have been mixed fleet, meaning they have equipment from many different manufacturers.
Okay.
We have connections with APIs from companies like John Deere, Raven, Case IH, New Holland, that allow us to pull data in from their systems and aggregate it all in one central spot.
Okay.
We also allow people to bring USB sticks off of their displays if they don't have a telemetry solution on their equipment, upload it to the website, and we'll process and stick all that information in one area. And when we bring that data in, we organize it so it's all stored in the same fashion. So whether you have a spraying operation from one piece of equipment and a planting operation from another type of equipment and a yield map from another piece of equipment, you can see all of that information in one spot, tied back to the field. And we spatially sort that data based on the boundaries that you put in the system. So having those boundaries in is key, like I said at the beginning. One of the new features we also have just released is the ability to take in as applied equipment data as a shapefile. So really any data that's coming in, if you can get in a shapefile format, you can bring that into the system and attach it to your fields as another layer for application. So it replaces the need to go to many different systems and parse data and piece it back together. Trimble Ag software does a lot of that work for you. Okay.
And you can view those layers on top of each other. Is that correct? Within the system?
You can. So you can view the layers in the web web application, you can also view them while in the field on your mobile phone. So once a layer comes into the system, and you can see different attributes as well. So if you bring in a yield map, for example, you could see the yield, you can see the elevation, you can see the speed, moisture, all of those different layers that are attached to the piece of equipment will be displayed on the map.
Excellent. Great. Thanks very much for submitting those questions. And thanks, Kevin, for the presentation and for going through this with us.
No problem.
I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into this webinar. If you have any questions, please give us a call or you can reach out by email. Also, keep in mind that we're launching new webinars each month, so be sure to check back. Next month, we'll be exploring the value of using satellite imagery as an early response tool in monitoring crop health. So stay tuned.